Chidana talking jungle taki la pe tuji. Zonga mahimi gaya mi bong mola. Anyone not understanding Zonga? So speak in Zonga if it's okay. I'll start with the traditional approach to education. Machirai Hema Pam Disugi Namsul Zambochi Wala Anidi Durekosuge, the Didi Kachimos washing Achiragi Kunlongdi, Nosa Tanhadi, Chokachari, Jawada La Gachiber Hema, Ranowasi, the Sendi, and the Sendi Zob member Lejum Chizobe, the Jawada La di Gotsuli Sui, Tuki Lejumchi, Kacha, Sumshi, Navashina Suna. Da Kunong Tuki Lejumchi Nashmandale, Dari Zenigi Chaladi, Naginanama, Chusi, Chimemchi, Lo Shun, Teti, Senidime, Darina, Jelshung, Zijong Lobdegi, Mi Kepki, Sushenanigi, Lerim Dambadinara, and Alushos, Tsunami Nikatule, in Damikile, Kadiches, Shuni. Then Nimato Chakseza, Vishimdale, roll up the loop. Yensemid is we need to Major Gadevishana, so we get such a bomb. Nasha Luikin Legging Aluna, Lochi Lavachin, Sundalo Magi, Kachikole Dagasi, Kandi Shuda, Luikile Katule, engaged Buddhism, the social cultural changes in Bhutan. Nambi Chue di Midenalu, Lalen Gadeve Tamninada, Midigi, Jurodi Gadu Joina Ikole, Shebachin says, Sume, the Diswashindale Nayadi, no such a tambe. Taudalu, Nachiragi Midedi, Jurol Ashichi Joigulu, Nachira Chanyamra, Nambasangi Bicho, Bemich Bendigi, and it showed the Midenalu Labedalu, Lalen Gadeve Tamnadi, Asichi. Judur the rolling Beswachi, Lejum, Monoigi, no such Shaila. The Lutendi, the Renigi, Jujadia, Nachiragi, Chogi Goadi, Missi Chitam Kildalu, Kadeve Lalechi Tapsubina, Nachira Midenalu, Choda Asichi, Jabgi Juju, Choda Matumbigi, Komshi, Gazumchi Daduga, Dichoha Gadevechamna, the College Shuges, Noida. The Chitam Machigi. Middle was a thunderer. Achira Middle Himalaya Asichi, Jawa Gachiber, Damam Benidi, Josuchi Yugulu, the Darinamagi, Juruanalu, Achira Yugo is a farm, Tom Bomnalu, Zomdidalu, Genku Ganea Banimi, Damamos and Benimi, Gachichi Berra, Chigi Dendi, Koshabe, Langdendi Shu Chesuch Judu. You have your Rangi genius that mean Nusubedi, Chi Hagobe, the Ras, the Chichi Geguchi Badi. That Tumdezum Bomnalu, Jamatok Daludi, take Gempu Gachina, Uchina Sumashebe, Midena Jamatomi as she Musuchi Tomena. The Didatiri drew, David Lo, Mother Dugi Nampinalu, Machira Mansu W. Sevici, Sap Timdalu, making us a Tanta de Sap Jove. Ramon the Gus. Tam the US no Tani Shuchesuchi, Genku Yu, Bebo Yu, Chashu US Midi, no Satani Shesuchi, Juganeve, Gomshichi Dadu. The Anisu so much a number, Sangi Chu, Bemichi Katrino Samachi, took them to Kadepen Daga, Joha Gadvecham, the Asichi Shuachin. That number Sangi Bachigi, Midenalu, Jamatok Tangida. Dilu Kanism Chishunidu. Dambadi, Namba Sangi Cho, Bemi is Wigi, Kuzulu, Sangi, Namza Shedubigi, Lamchop, Mosheba Nami, Juba Namizui. Disui Katulega Chizebopshi. Nibadi, Achera Namba Sangi Chogi, Gehatomi is me, Namba Yene Segi, Midigi, Bulu Kadebe Bebopshido. And Zum Khan Izum Chitomena. That Damba Zumchinos Tambachin. Dampo Beashing Ashray, 미디에다 지소나루 미 마슈치 하루 남으면 족되미 레중데 찌되미 당포기 노서 땅땅 몰라 ancient worldview people who were god fearing who were pious 그치베로라 데 미투 타마 하기 까시 온세 레 중제데 치다 미투스 노서 슈윈디 티저 뭐 레중 좀 지조되기라 다른 남바디 마시라다 누초레 동비기 쳔리기 롭종의 슈체단디 최매 링룩스입니다. Secularism. 아니디 슈체다다베 미디스유 노살웨 하다 데스미기 노살 슈봄타니미 하다 제노스타메베 아 딘남토인세 pure superstitions 마타옹 버들고 마합장 디 디즘베라 레 줌데로 타담실루스미르스 아치치니 셴수지 슈라 뉘토 링룩세 시카기 주잘라디 아치 슈체소지 나나기 셈기디 슈추수지 조도이바 materialism has become stronger because our whole sort of modern process is based on a system that's oriented towards matter. Chenik zubchi havura chenik deals with more science deals with matter. Tani beodalu ngachiragi lobdanagi lobchenderu midenagi jurobiru shudi 파마 치카유미기 쭉 독도 리베 두비미기 녀보디로 슈야스 거다 나나기 넘버 쉐바 생기 내탕디로 슈 마템거다 단디 베오달로 미데나로에 하스치니 데시치니다 타 담시송에서 아시치 마 밥지 조디요 몰라 다포 베와신 미데서 가야라 레줌 데치미로 할로 도미로 벤디기 람쇼 디수게 초디 마 미데나로 잡고디게 젬베 오여봐 코나야 리카 참치 슈루 다산나 슈르라 미데 날 미시 디수기 잡수치로 상기 템바 줌메 심지기 된 젬메 세 이치도 모나 다 다른 나무 디스나도 미데기 미치 땅치기리 람쇼 디수기 다산나 슈디다 리치나 슈디기베 펜 가립시 토미나 쿵이게 미소 펜 토도 유르라 디로 이체 미소다 아 안남디수 가라테 신임 mambalu 파다수 덴지슈아신 거리 bom고발로 렌테 초코 주두단 기프트 남서 bombe 피고 있어 빠디수에 남서 bombe 피고 있어 안좀이 노사 슈샤디 버더라 다니 베오달루 람초기 카툴레 담포기 룩시 짬치 두진난 두바친 그 초디로 펜네 도웨다 야 리슈가 곰잡 슈미디 랑게 주바 냠톡데 레줌 조도 데베오달루 미데나로 마짜마 똑디게 미데로 펜 마토바신 담포기 미스다 데나마 미스미다 야 리슈칼루 슈슈짬치기 잡수치스 자치르지미 라하옹스노메나 야니 베오달 람초기 카툴레 미데나로 마 쥔디게 미데르 차디 저와젝탕디다 남치가 미데로 카치위기 더샵된 림조 초난에서 제곱디람 주위 내게 좀씩 임에 디제고요 뭐 딜레 하기베 다르나모 내당로 해바신 미데루 이날에 나슌수로 랍된 길 해립니다 랍된 나슌디수로 랍제점니 남선을 같이 해봐 다디 같이 복지 같이 뒤에서 하신 마치 개갑디다 나나 주로 좋은 맛에 마소 시각이 개합디술에 마치 뺐다수 시각이 개합이 냠용톱 메모나 시각이 개합이 냠용톱달로 로출로 젠좀 노스탄바친 예수기 출로 베미 좀 노스탄다 초베미 잠시 멤버이신들 미데나를 차슈미베 빼차셔서 마더 테레사기 차라가되나 나 아니 좀 베미들로 디로기 추고 레줌 이메스 이시게베 티 초에 다수베 미데로 펜투베스 티 디즘베라로 힌두기 초베로다 무슬림기 초베로다 주즈기 베로다 마슈찬으로 지나로 파 미데로 차슈니기 예나디 슈베입니다. Social service is a very strong and important component of most of the religious traditions. 다 아니 좀 통달로 남바 상기비 초 베미지에 상기비 템벌로 샷차와진데 상기비 템바 시 약생 점니 공페타니기 두신나무에 디베오달룬 다또 뭐만 미실로 펜도치 제곱 두바라 데 디마시바기 치디 디골레 슈와신 헤마니 뽀 존폴 샤미디 남비기 초루 가빠난디 데 가치기 텔레 가빠나이스 슈라 남비기디 데 라짬치 냥엘레 데바 시위기 고판 쇠니 이메스 직당 셈제다 미대로 펜당선 통미 수에스 안에 가 권한 뒤바다 다 안에 좀 뒤서 내시지 마치 냠용 톱들로 마치라기 람 촉디스에 코나 셰바다 두번 나니 잠치 마두하기 미실로 직당이 펜 톱지에 제고 같이 쓰십니다. 데 디기 마두와 찌디 같이 주디에서 제가 점님 찬양 날로라 투식이 주로디 나면서 범 주디에 뭐시다. 투식이 주로를 때디 사체질이 지나 회디데 해마다 마로베 녹답 숨답이 잠독도베 족소베 회수베 하수이 마치라 찌데치 저베누베로 잠독도 배수 족잡에 배수베 하수이 때 라베로 라고자심들의 쉬트니리 당부벤 이구 쇼르간디니들로 가르치 바고 주지 최대시고도 다들 남바 해마 주문이기 디니디 대나마 주무추 함베디우다로 가르마 주함 대시다 주도냐 뭐시다 아니 배우들로 라기 쉬디 주바주바 튀니기 공식 수수해봐 해마 배워진 뉴시디에 나디게 데 유가르바 미주치바 오니스랍들로 나모니스 나세 오니스랍시 뚝바라 나세 주주 구로 딱딱 온것에 미바라 대나마 뉴시디 종탑배로 라기 쉬있다 한배로 레와디 하면서면 담자 주바 뉴자 데 땐독도베 배법디 쉬야스바라 다니 노스탐들로 미기 공신나로라 레와디 토타 족소베 슈베 템법 주바신 남초기 태갈에 나도 공작베 됐음지 탐지게 된다는 감명함 답도 와대야 슈레 마상 계심들의 팬통스 샵도 미두에 봐라 팬디 나도라 토고 봐라 다르나마 의미로 슈 템법하신 주바라 템법 봐라 미디기 나로 레와이 몸 전디기 남초기 만나니 데 남포기 미로 나도 좀베 생활을 주나는 거남 답 되디기 슈망 마상 기어들을 주는 팬통스 샵하신 디 해마좀 팬통 미수에 이 초기 조든 조스 미수에 단이 벼들 초 재미기 남 초기 태갈에 미데나는 무마베 짜마도 디게 때 남목디 너스네 같이 쓰십니다 나디 같이베 디 제법 마서지 들어 가dim집에 초다 마팀바진디 때 주섬이 벌 로야 리틀로 공잡비 주니디 잠치 총 5만이 남 미데나로 자주니디 총 5만 맨서시니 총 5마디 주고 때 타브라미모 레벨달로 상계기 총 5마디 노스타마신다 상계기 총 5마 특사디 가티 투모서 가진 상계기 초디 요고비 준센 송고비기 미된디라 셈질로 펜통이 된다를 배도 다또 나 우이 차루 퓨이 몰라니 나기나 남중게 as지 짐주나 주심들 특시나게 노드 퓨이 아니 쇼로가 담보디지나시다 아니면 상기기 순수미 있어. 상기기 같이 쓰는 셈진디스로 펜토바신 나로 펜토도 있어. 셈진로 냅겐 나로 냅기 기미 있어. 초세로 상기기 초 룹니디 초 셈진 데토토 오니기 탑베. 셈진 데토토 오니기 된달레베 초 순수미 있어. 메모라 안데 배우들로 람초기 미데나로 장모도디에 펜도니디 뭐마 초주의더라. 뭐마 배워진 리트레로 참진에다 자산나를 슈초나니디 탑럼 좀 지몰라. It's a means, a method to develop yourself. 그 뭐마 슈레 중제 뭐마 통곡디 셈질로 펜토 수비기 니버디 통곡이더라. The religious training one receives in a monastery or in a hermitage is all to prepare one to be a better instrument of service, a better servant for the sentient world, for the entire world. So, ultimate objective of the Buddha's teachings is really to serve the world, not only to serve them in a temporary way by giving them temporary happiness or benefits, but by taking them all the way to the ultimate goal of Buddhahood. So, our religious persons really have to then rethink and redesign their way of approaching the society, of serving the society. Hema bewachin te shebada dubada ele shabten rimdugi gorebe midelu chashusudigi tube midelu tube tamchu khonal tube te darna da disu judijo nachera nosa tantadi cheme ringru ko shu chesu jujo we think more secular nachera nosa tantadi rewa shu chesu chi we come with higher expectations, more quicker results, and so forth. So, as a result, I think the religious community has to adapt as well to answer to the social needs and social expectations. So that's one section or one sector in our society which probably needs to change in the way they engage Buddhism in the real world. But that's for the religious persons to decide. We can offer our opinions, but none of us here are really having a profession of being religious persons more. To give both priestly and pastoral services to the community. So Buddhism remains relevant to contemporary times. Jinjuk bemi as Buddhist. The Kondo bemi this we continue to develop the Kachita Mes moment. The Didi Atane Tawashin Chogi Peshada Chiri with Tawashin Nambi Namba bemi Michida, Nambi Juda de Jumi, Nambi Jinjuk Smi Mizun Tendonda. Some people are real Buddhist. And many others are just followers of Buddhist. People are saying that Dalalam Buddhist is Shagi Mola. There will be no issue about that. Chapjikim Rinpoche Buddhist is Shadagada. Namasangi is. They were the Dini Tendumi Dini Jinju Chanamra Nambi Gekatsunga so Leju Petashi Chevasindi Nambi Geva Suba Lahayula. Nambi Michiki Tindadi Lombe Dubam Kona Namba Umaju Lahadubatela. The Gachive so Chingachiki Midenaru, Tamchi, Nambiki Shirlu Tomaminduba, Namba Kare Bivina, Gachi Namba Zoina, Namba Beshimdale, Gachida Gachi Begomina, and Suhami Guevara. Then Niva Bedal drew, how good the Besturo did Halen Hamini Kanjadubara. So people lack the knowledge of what makes them a Buddhist, how they can become a Buddhist, and they also don't have the inclination to really practice the things that they know. So, Nambi society, as a Buddhist society, we have a major onus, a responsibility to live up to the religious tradition. Because I think a lot of us are just followers of Buddhists rather than being Buddhists ourselves. And it's important, I think, therefore, to work on it. And now, if you look at new Buddhists in the West, as I've lived in many countries in the West and visited many Dharma centers, I can confirm that most of the new Western Buddhists, new converts to Buddhism, know a lot more about Buddhism than we do. Jubimi Chitamachilu Chogi Kunki Sochin, Namisimi Lakayuda. Ro Chiluk Jube, Nambina, Zumichilu, Chilichilu Juachin, Kung Otoptoshiki Sukungi. The Gachilu Tuma Tusadi, Ro Kungi Katuledi. Gachichi Benisonora, and Hagochizo. Dele Hagoshimdale, dear such betameba, Juturo Maturo. The Jomatuaji Koja, Drushimichi baby. That Mopa Nuchu Katule, the Nama Nambichona Jumidus. No, say, then talk to the Mila one. Gachichi, Concerta Duzumbe, Atri, as a tat, Georgianichu. Then Garalu Shunimu, be one, Lasha and Vetu. The Machina Dubi. The Dizumber Rangshingi, Shikudara, Nambi Hapchina, Kimi, give me the Sunos Namachin, Mashuchi, Namba is with the Chikioda number Juduzumbe no vet, no Satep, Kachem Tamabara. The number Judi Mapale Nivala, Sangi Chona, you cannot ever become a Buddhist by birth. That's not sufficient. Birth gi Buddhist Jewish Midi, Mapale Kumia. They are the we see a lot of lack of enthusiasm, a major sort of problem, or one could say a tendency of being indifferent, complacent. So we don't really want to inquire further and know more, learn more, and do new things. And 아니 벤디 나치라 미디기 나 유미 남바이 서라 남비기 콩디 레줌베케 마수 테 콩게 지치시디 베스로 디디 라린 마카페 류메 테 다디 마베로 케메노와 고 민도 테 와이 람치기 차슈베 많이 잠도 와친 디기 뚝메나세 숨바친 테 디기 다 배차기 쿵다 초기 쿵다 지와지 대지금 메나 수준이다. 대 아기 초기 쿵좀지 시 뒤디게 쉬다게. 다도 아니 주제다 아니 쿵게도 좀 지왜. 초세미디 상기게 숨다라 슈디 다치 공을 주도 좀에 시각이 주잘라 리중단이다 페조야게 단이다 가또 아니 직진나 튕겐디서 가또 또 오니게 된다리 숨숨 짜다보래 멤버라 고다 콜레라 상기기 초숨미디 미빠 차냥 나나기 셈로 때리기에 나나기 셈디 주주변이기 된다리 숨숨 치다 다나 진종로 되는 차비즘이 수이 가득 캔도 나기 진종기 탑람 주요 뭐 총좀대로 총기 진종난 총잡한기 탑람 지 니들 쪽 택배 초나 유라 초나 그 집에 와서 담바라 랑이 믹된디 the vision the objective has to be set so it's really like setting up a business plan or a strategy a management strategy you have to first figure out what you are doing as a Buddhist or following Buddhism. They are not migdendi using Google. Migdendi, Mapa Jitin Gato Kito Gadvezoni, Chogi Migduni Mona. They were the Migdun so the Rangi Semdi, can you make a harapa metan? Can set. You take the Chitoni to the Chanam Topsuchibe. Anism Zori Rangi Semdi number Dapozoni the Chogi. That's the vision, the objective of the Buddhist path. That dele anina henigi dendale the rimbatsam goala. Tablam, what kind of strategy you want to adopt to reach that goal of that pure, perfect, enlightened mind. Then tablam disu you tap ningji goes, shirap tongmanigi goa goes. So you get all these resources, these strategic methods to reach that goal. The Dizumbera Chonalu, you have the milestones. Shogi Nanalu, Tamba Aneve, Anchiga Hewose. Anigalu, the Tamadu Aneve Shams, Anikabu, Nimbo, Antidote, and Zultendas. So it's a very strategic approach towards reaching a goal. You basically have to first understand your current situation of the mind. It's really like doing the SWOT analysis. You have to understand the strengths, you have to understand its weaknesses, what opportunities it has, and then set a target. So it's really a project of working on the internal asset that you have, this mind, this democratic, egalitarian asset which we all have equally, and then improve that, transform that into this priceless, invaluable spirit or wisdom of the Buddha. So it's really like a business project. You set on the project with a specific target or goal and work on the paths leading to it. Anibedolu, chogi denamara anibedwala. Semdi jurochap dive, machida to tamel semdi, ishuma sangi to junichi. Ken gara pa metanimo. When I talk about ken or faults, it's mainly the defiling emotions. Na semna Ranu Shule Kinigi, Nyomongbi, Namto diso. The Yuntensedalu, Ranu Shule Pentobigi, Givigi, Yunte, Givigi, Semgi Chadso. Tanibedalu, Chogi Denang Momadi Ani Shabdalu. Now you cannot just become a Buddhist by calling the monks to do an annual ritual at home. You only become a Buddhist by having a Buddhist goal and following the Buddhist strategy and going through that Buddhist path. Tanibedalu, Tuksa Moma, Machi, the Namba is Ishmdale, Namba Moma, Lejume Bego Wachin. We all look at our body very often, no? How many times we stand in front of the mirror to assess our body? Ladies do more than gentlemen here, perhaps. But if we then compare that to the number of times we look at our mind, how many look at our mind? One of the priceless education I got, I think when I look back at my 35 years of education is, my Zonkar teacher in Ura, when I was a young boy, said, Karma, Churu had Niwajuda, Mishana Zubishna Lab, Jango Kebe, there is Lejum Gasibi, Zob Gasibi, Nostamomar. That is the best education, I think, if I look back. Zudi te Hageta Salamete, 마플라니 곰디츠스도 봐라. 항상 나슈야스도 뭐 따우따서 되는 나슈야스도. 셈디 아시 짜긴 따고 왔더라. 해마 곰디 밉더로디 아시 પાંચે સોંગ દી વે ઉસુ ચપ દી વેતા તે બોલે બોલે વે ગોમડી સુશિમ દરે દે જમ수 જોગ나 다는 배우들 초 배고 와신 남바 배고 와신 뭐마 셈도 쪼었던 거 배다 그 셈도 쪼었던 게 셈 유시 잡내로 넣어서 가네 뭐 담바 되와신 그 남베게 그 최 미수 배다 so when we think that we are Buddhist just by going to see a lama once in a while or going to circumambulate the stupa on holy days or burn, say, light some butter lamps, burn some incenses, it doesn't really add up to make oneself a proper Buddhist. So I think when we are talking about engaged Buddhists, especially among the laities, not among the religious priests, I've already discussed it, no, among ourselves as followers of Buddhism, we have to bring into our mind stream the qualities, the virtues of Buddhism, apply it first within ourselves, and then try to also inspire others and spread it outward. So that's what I feel, that as engaged Buddhists, we have to really bring in Buddhism into our real lives. We cannot allocate an artificial small compartment of life to Buddhism. You cannot just become a Buddhist during the Choku time in the year or while visiting a temple, but Buddhism should inspire you to work in your daily life. And for that reason, I think we have to really have the Buddhist values and principles inspire us in all walks of life, in all professions. So when you graduate from here and become public administrators, I think you should really run your office or your company with Buddhist principles and values. If you become an entrepreneur or a businessman, you should incorporate the Buddhist values and principles into your business and entrepreneurship. It can't be segregated and kept aside for a specific ritual or specific routine. As Buddhist, if you want to really actively engage in society as a Buddhist, you have to blend these values and principles in your daily life. Now, on the whole, there is a strong sense of reluctance, complacency, and indifference to things. Kind of a spiritual apathy. Sita sudivecher auda chabum zenilo di ha gomnilo simde shadayo desumdi rolam shop disu ilame te ngasi debe bemego so there is this automatic reluctance in us. And the Chishuddhism in the West, you have these new converts who come and want to know things exactly as they are and then try it out. But Buddhists don't do that. We have some kind of an inborn or a cultural sort of malice where we are not willing to learn and explore and expand. And this is not only in spirituality, it also happens in terms of our social life. If there is something, say a roadblock or the drainage around this building is blocked or something, no one will feel obliged to fix it. No? The maintenance guy of the college will come and fix it. The office must be responsible for it. We have this very deeply ingrained, widespread sort of culture of indifference and apathy, of not really wanting to get hands dirty to fix things, even if they're very small things. In traditional village context, because you own the environment, because you own the community, you are more actively engaged. But I think in a modern urban settlement, because we don't own the immediate environment, there is this complacency and indifference to do things. It's a major problem. The chogi tegalwacha nikyendi the la lejum bendino to maybe lelo del labila. You get this lelo, this attitude to not do something in three ways. Tete di nyomle zimbi lelo se gache begomano omni dunidira. Boring man say no do it more. How many young people in Bhutan say boring? Probably boring is one English word that is most sort of used among our youth. Then the omni dunidi chi da. The chi di ma bemisus, lack of confidence, lack of willingness to do things, not having that motivation to do things. Ma bemisu shada minase. Didi choding ashi hago misu shada shada ro lam chop disi gom da simo. So there is that kind of lelo. The chi di dernamo shu chi di jawan yinshinge lelo stiwida. The lelo, this attitude of not getting to positive things by being distracted in negative things, in pure, sort of profane, mundane, banal entertainment and things like TV. You know? How many of us spend hours and hours watching TV? Of course, there is a lot of education you can get through TV as well, but you can do a lot more productive and useful things during that time. So I think there is basically in the society here, which we partly got from our education system, partly because of the transition from a traditional society to a modern society, this very widespread reluctance to do things, lack of enthusiasm, strong, no, I shouldn't say strong, but rather the unwillingness to participate, to be active, to be engaged. And this one can also see in many social aspects. And it's a major problem. You know why? Because the more you are willing, the less you are willing to do, the more you are dependent on somebody else who will do it. Chogi nandale berura, rangi cho di shuwe mabewachin, rangi sem cho hachim cho rangi mabewachin, then you are going to depend on somebody else for your spiritual needs. Te ani bendi anshi junki dato gachi kuchi berura tunzum chitang rangi tang leju machine digira. lam chopchi chebe, lam choplu tendiwe bumril hachu, tapsani tanchu, chusiri nanchu bemur. And that's depending on somebody else. And depending on somebody else is never going to bring lasting or genuine happiness. So we have this deeply sort of, ingrained culture of dependence as a result of not being actively engaged. And again, it's not only in spiritual activities that we are dependent. In fact, in spiritual practices, we are probably less dependent than in our economic affairs of life, in political affairs of life, and even in educational affairs of life. Now, if you look at current state of Bhutan, the kind of dependence we have on our neighbors, on the outside world. Look, you would understand more about this kind of economic and trade dependence than I do. You know, how we are entirely dependent now, even for basic commodities that we consume. 50 years ago, that was not really the case. In the same way, we are so dependent even on political affairs on a lot of our neighbors. And then education, we have become heavily dependent on what comes from outside because we have adopted a modern Western model of education that there is now this heavy dependence on outside for expertise to develop and take our education further. I must say, even in culture sometimes, in our own culture we are becoming dependent on others. These days you have lots of people who come here and advise us on mindfulness, for instance, on meditation. These are our own heritage. And what these really mean is, these are not going to bring us the kind of happiness we want. And I will move on from here to argue, again from a Buddhist angle, of how dependence is wrong, how we should not have too much dependence if we are genuinely in search of happiness. Now, going back again to the concept of mind. We all strive to get happiness, according to the Buddhist philosophers. And I think it's a truth, empirical truth, that we all do wish happiness. We don't want suffering. And not only Buddhist masters, even non-Buddhist teachers and philosophers and all the sensible people argue the same. So we work from that premise. Gaira dewa duvis michi. The dewa gobachi dewa di gatira top sodaru. Basically, happiness is the state of mind. Semgi netang chilu gamagas the dema dese javis. And if you really want to obtain that ultimate happiness, you have to have your mind in the right states, irrespective of any material comfort, any external factors. If your mind is not in the right situation, in the right condition, you will never reach that genuine state of happiness. So, andi bodalu dewa tusa de semlu tukduela. The semdi gazumchi yues labdalu di ngachi semdi rangshingira ko namse her semdi goyangja or semdi rangshingira chugene bewachin tarba so open, free and spontaneous with all semgi netangbi. So if you were to reach an ultimate state of happiness, you have to have that state aligned with the nature of the mind. Semgi netang ga imi the chidigi mabewachin tisem makolera detok to jomtus umbila bewachin achigi that kap monigi dendale so nap zumchi ka deve chohachaku kap jomitupse or kap image di kap zone jamse the dizumbe semdi kora rangshingira the free open spontaneous yundigi the semdi dizo suvis shambala. So if you want to genuinely reach the state of happiness, you have to develop the mind as it is or as its nature is. Horagi rangshin ga imidera sutyom basta. 아제송의 이미지 멤버들이 그 북된 것도 미조스마. 그 샘기 랑신데 가서 모아서 다루디. It's really totally free, independent, open, spontaneous. It's this amazing sort of state of being. Whatever constraints we feel, whatever oppressions we feel are temporary. The obscurations are temporary, the defilements are temporary. That's how, especially the Mahayana Buddhist and the Vajrayana Buddhist philosophers would argue. Semgi ngode rangshingira te goyang chue rangwang chen lumchi se. They were the loburgi jimadi sui asikap yues shimbal. Now, in order to take that mind to genuine state of happiness, you have to get that mind in its natural state. Can you do the same? The rangshingira rangwang chen kora shellu matemiji bewachin da to machi laji gachi berura shellu tenni la chance bewachi semgi dewa betops mebala semgi ngodi shellu matemiji bendi machi dukje dia shellu matemji excuse me, sorry semgi ngodi rolu matemiji benidigi machi dewa ngoma thonigi dindaloe rolo matemiki tablabjirugo ose. So basically dependence doesn't lead us to the true real nature of the mind. And if the mind is not in its original natural state, there's no way the mind will be at ease or totally at home. And that means there won't be genuine happiness. So based on this ontological argument on how the mind really exists, mo semgi netang de gazum chidu dida chitao dole ro shenlu ten dinidi te dewegi tabla mense dewa todu wachin rangwan tuko sibala rangwan de this was. For that reason, you will see one of the famous sayings that we have, rangwan thamje dungei me dewa in shangwan thamje dungel in simichi. And I'm using this here because I think we have to have such values inspire us to cut down on our dependence. No? The dependence in spiritual practices, dependence in economy, dependence in education, dependence in any form. And I think for some reason the Bhutanese society right now, starting from the individual to the state, has become too inclined, too occupied with dependence on other factors, other countries, other organizations and so forth. So there is definitely a strong need for us to work on this habit of dependence, and especially when we talk about people like you, you would be all graduating from here and going on to lead government offices, businesses, corporates, and therefore will be playing leading roles in the society. 미디기 고치페 차라나온 벌을 쉬래. 야니 남들로 다토디 오늘 셴베슈 아 차라나 고모츠 헤마디 때 마슈출라니 닝톡다 로호 두바다. 나기 베니 짜니스 바 아프리나 아니 마투도 아니가 주타니 있어. 때 나기 베 미데로 샤도 아니 베 슈니 있으기 닝톡 로호 다토디 오메 발라. 때 쉬래야 주비신데 롱나 주삼디시 조다벤 아우 다 조미도 베세 때 라야 다 또랑기 편견사기 쪽태배 주전이시 그거 몰라. 라야들의 파피 럼루다 TV 되면 봐. 아니 왠지 니 하둘레디 I think the only way we can counteract, we can overcome our strong sense of dependence in spiritual affairs, in all other affairs. We have to have the young people like you, dynamic, ambitious, bright young people like you to work on it. And the first step we have to take is really to do things ourselves. We must all start seeking independence, seeking freedom, seeking liberation ourselves. We have to start as individuals first, I think. And therefore I thought the best value or the best advice we can take is from the ancient Bhutanese proverb. Sipa hagisuru maparangi sigo. Jurochi tempo bachin. 마팔 하기 차로 제동 되거다 주로 몸만 안 겠던 거스. 마파 디기 빼디기 된다 같이 숨에서 하지. 해마 빠우다 빰디술라. 하주얼루 마팔 하주 심데레 아치 다시죠 뭐라. 때 마주이 해마레라 랑게 아치치 다시 마쳐바치 하기 준비도 되면 와라. 때 아니벤디 때 마주를 주셨다 아치치랑게 고담바 다시 직접 되버신 때는 하여 주기세. 때 아니 좀배 미데나로 셀로 땡드니기 둥엘로 주니 곰시디 주시당 무엇인 주시디 마시레이 카툴레라 해마 짜기 문거다. Demand you rely on gods and governments to do it for you, the change will never happen. More. So I will end here without talking too much, but we will happily take questions.